Recording in progress.
All right, good morning. Welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Agenda Setting Work Session for Tuesday, June 9th, 2026. It's 9:05 a.m. My name is Ty Mentzer, Chair of the Board. To my left, Vice Chair Commissioner Wayne Fournier, Commissioner Emily Klaus, Commissioner Carolina Mejia, Commissioner Rachel Grant, participating virtually, County Manager Leonard Hernandez, Assistant County Manager Jennifer Walker, and Clerk of the Board Amy Davis. First up this morning is a first review of our business agenda, proposed agenda for next Tuesday, June 16th. And so if we pull that forward, meeting called to order at 2 p.m. Pledge of Allegiance to be led by District 3, which is me. Land acknowledgement, approval of agenda. And then first up is proclamation for LGBTQ plus Pride Month.
Thank you, Chair. We will have several local organizations here in attendance, and one of our speakers and our performance will be from Cheer Tacoma, who is an LGBTQ ally, and they will be performing cheers for the performance and potentially some tumbling. So it will be exciting and
It'll be a tumbling extravaganza.
Extravaganza.
I saw the run show. It looked pretty
Yeah.
pretty robust,
Yes,
so that'll
very.
be good.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions for the clerk on proclamation? Okay, then we have public comment related to agenda items, county manager update.
Thank you so much, Chair. We'll have a few department updates that we'll look forward to share with the board.
Consent items, we have 12 proposed. First up is Central Services, resolution adopting the workspace planning policy.
Did you want to, are we not adding?
Oh, do you want to?
Sure. So there's one department item that we would like to add to the consent agenda, and that is the first department item for Central Services, the memorandum of understanding establishing a temporary voting center at the atrium.
I do not want to move that to the consent agenda.
Thank you.
You want to move it?
I want to move it off the agenda, but we can talk about it when we get there.
Okay, well, where does it need to go in terms of today's discussion?
It can stay where it's at, since the commissioner wants to keep it on discussion, and we'll jump straight into the resolution for adopting the workspace.
Oh, I see, it's already on here.
Yes.
Yeah, it's already on there.
I just
Okay.
checked the wrong box, which is why I asked the clerk
Yep.
to move it from department to
Okay,
consent.
but we have a spot where we'll be able to
Yeah, it's on
discuss it.
department items.
Yes.
Got it, yep, I remember that. All right, well then let's talk about workplace planning,
Yes.
workspace planning policy.
I will handle this item. It actually is workplace planning. It's the workplace planning policy, and so we will be making that change. The idea being workplace is more encompassing, it's larger, not only workspaces, but common areas, parking, that type of thing. And it's really a policy that is reinforcing what we found to be best practices and what in part we've been doing on some of our projects that we've put in place, and that is establishing standards and having that establishment be with the Central Services Director in establishing those. So this is asking the board to authorize delegate that authority to the Central Services Director in establishing those standards. So when we think about like standard workspaces, the flooring, all of the things that whatever we're going to build will be maintaining. So there's some value in having some consistency with, with that. You'll also note in the materials that it does not apply to spaces used for highly specialized functions such as courtrooms, warehouses, specialized health services, or detention centers. And also noting that it does include the coordination with those offices and departments, so consideration is given for the end user. So it's not done unilaterally, but there is a person that is establishing what those standards are, and everyone will see what those standards are.
I commend Central Services and Assistant County Manager Jennifer Walker for really working hard to bring some framework and establishing policies and procedures as the board is directed. So lots of work behind the scenes that then comes forward for the board's consideration. Thank you.
The policy was sent out to all offices and departments for feedback and impact to operations as well, which is our standard process for policies.
Was there a lot of input or?
There were questions about what the actual standards are and said that maybe the policy was a little brief, but the policy itself is for the delegation of authority on setting standards.
Questions for Assistant County Manager? Commissioner Mejia?
Thank you. And so when will the board see those standards?
The standards,
If we are to delegate authority, like what would be the process then? Then the standards would be created and it would come in front of the board to approve? Like what is the process for that?
standards would be approved by the Director of Central Services.
We can send out the information once it's put together for the board's awareness.
Yeah. They're being established now. And this is all in advance of moving downtown, so we're gonna have a campus and wanting to make sure that we've got some consistency in how we're going to be developing that property, or the space, I should say.
I understand that, and maybe I can have a conversation offline. I'm still trying to understand like the purpose and why these policies can't be created and then just be brought in front of the board instead of delegating that authority. But I'm happy to have this conversation offline.
Absolutely.
Other questions? Okay, we'll go to the next item. Number 2 is Community Planning and Economic Development, Skookumchuck Water Rights Acquisition and Purchase and Sale Agreement.
Good morning, Commissioners. This item is a culmination of 3 years' worth of work where we are finalizing the purchase and sale agreement of 800 acre-feet worth of water from the TransAlta Water Bank for the amount of $2.36 million, all funding of which is coming from a competitive Washington Department of Ecology Streamflow Restoration Grant. So the item before you today is to request authorization for the county manager to sign that purchase and sale agreement that we can then finalize with TransAlta and go through the closing by the end of the year.
Sure, what I'll just add is yet another win that our CPED department is putting up on the scoreboard here for environmental focused development in our county. Their ability to be thoughtful, and as Ashley mentioned, 3 years ago, so I can't take any credit for this one, 3 years ago, taking the direction from the board on how to look out for these opportunities so that it actually enhances our ability to facilitate the right type of growth in our county. Just wonderful to see the momentum that's building here.
Thank you.
Would this be, I mean, this is a big deal. Would this be something that's moved in department items? And I mean, I know we've already done a press release, but we could do another one. I mean, this is a big deal. It's not, I don't want it to just kind of pass through in a consent agenda.
Yeah, we're happy to give it a highlight in department items during the business meeting.
Okay.
And this is, if I'm remembering correctly, this is where we're going above and beyond like projection for development needs and acquiring additional water for stream flow purposes. It's kind of serving dual purpose in that way.
We're not only addressing the minimum requirements, we are going above and beyond to take into consideration climate resiliency. And then we have submitted an additional grant this year to go even beyond that. So this is just the first building block to try to do thoughtful stream flow restoration planning and the Chehalis Basin with this unique, once-in-a-generation opportunity to purchase water rights.
Yeah, it's huge.
There's no other jurisdiction taking this approach, is my understanding.
We've been asked to come and present at conferences about the methodology that we're using in our grant proposals.
In fact, Chair, I think if we were to, as we will be sitting down to kind of talk about this, if we were to take everything that CPED is doing right now in this space, it's quite impressive. And to do an inventory of that and to really highlight that is something that we look forward to working with the board on. Because in pieces, these things come before the board and it may not reach to the level of understanding for the public that when you put it all together, everything CPED is doing is quite comprehensive in their efforts to continue to advance environmental goals.
Okay, so we move to department, it sounds like. Thank you.
Thanks.
Item 3 is contract for federal fiscal year 25 emergency management performance grant, emergency services.
Yes, so Emergency Management Manager Kyle Boosted will be covering this item and the other emergency services item on the agenda.
Hi, good morning. Kyle Husted, Emergency Management Manager. And this first item is for our annual Emergency Management Performance Grant, commonly known as EMPG. This is a grant that predates DHS. It funds fundamental emergency management activities. There's a delay in bringing this to you because there were a lot of litigation with the terms and contracts. That has been sorted out. The Washington State Attorney General's Office authorized Military Department and Washington State Emergency Management Division to accept the grant. And based on those resolutions of litigation, and so now it's being passed to jurisdictions across the state. It is a 50% match grant. This is included in our budget. It funds, it supports multiple positions in all of our emergency management activities. And happy or open to answering any questions.
Not happy.
Well, you caught that. I didn't mean.
And the board did receive, Ben did send out an e-brief on this item on May 27th.
Any questions for Kyle? Hearing none. Thank you. You got the next item? All right. Item 4, Emergency Medical Services Council bylaws update.
Yes, this is, again, it's still me, Kyle Busad, Emergency Management Manager. I am filling in for Ben Miller-Todd. This is the EMS Council worked on their bylaws. The changes included addition of conflict of interest language, inclusion of Open Public Meeting Act language. It adjusted, basically rebranded one of their committees to an EMS Contract Negotiation Committee, which added some clarification, which restricts contractors from being on the committee. It incorporates all agency contracts into the EMS Council negotiations process. And it was unanimously approved during the May EMS Council meeting.
Questions on EMS Council bylaws? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Public Health is up. Item 5, Public Amendment 14 to the Department of Health Consolidated Contract.
Good morning.
Good morning. Jennifer Height, Director of Public Health and Social Services. And if I may combine items 5 and 6, they go together. Item 5 is an amendment number 14 to the Washington State Department of Health Consolidated Contract. Largely, it's an addition to our maternal child health block grant with an increase of $36,000, just over $36,000. And then item number 6 is amendment number 15 to the CONCON, the Washington State Department of Health Consolidated Contract. Same, another increase of $56,861 for the maternal child health block grant. This is just the normal amount. It's the same amount we received last year. It's just slow coming from the federal government. So in fact, there will be a third one coming this month yet. So we're getting it in pieces, and every time that happens, a new CONCON amendment is required. So that's how both of these are connected.
Questions on 5 or 6? All right, let's go to item 7, 2026 cold and hazardous weather contracts.
Yes, thank you. This is to approve contracts with 3 nonprofit homeless services organizations for cold and hazardous weather in the amount of $300,000. And this is related to the briefing that we gave you all on May 19th, 2026. On January 6th, the Board of County Commissioners approved issuing a request for proposal to solicit applications for cold and hazardous weather. And the RFP was issued on January 23rd with a closing date of March 6th. And funding available for this RFP comes from HB 5386, which are local document recording fees. 5 applications were submitted totaling nearly $890,000. And the Homeless Services Advisory Board then met on March 16th to make recommendations to the Regional Housing Council, which they did on April 22nd. And then this is for a 1-year period, July 1, 2026 to June 30th, 2027. So you will see that there are 3 entities: Family Support Center for cold weather sheltering, Interfaith Works, and OLIMAP for both cold and hot or smoke all hazard sheltering. And so those are the 3 contracts that are there: $170,000 for Family Support Center, $100,000 for Interfaith Works, and $30,000 for services through OLIMAP. Happy to answer any questions.
These are very important contracts for our community residents, so I appreciate the staff working hard to round these up, and our providers do a good job in this space.
And it's timely. We're watching the weather for this weekend. It looks like 89, 90, but that isn't necessarily enough to trigger the sheltering for heat, but we will keep an eye on it.
Questions for Dr. Freiheit? Okay, looks like we're good there. Let's go to item 8, single source procurement, Northwest Integrated Health.
Yes, this is to approve the single source procurement of provision and delivery of medications for opioid use disorder from Northwest Integrated Health for $380,000. And this is to provide all 3 medications under MOUD for individuals incarcerated in the Thurston County Jail. And just to give you a little bit of background on this, you all had previously approved this sole source on April 29th, 2025. For Northwest Integrated Health, as it was brought forward by the Sheriff's Office. And now that this opioid settlement dollars are paying for this, so Public Health and Social Services had to do our due diligence. There's been many other providers that have come into the region that can provide these services. So we double checked with every single provider to see who can offer what services at this time. And at this time, we verified that it is still only Northwest Integrated Health that can provide these services. But there are also some changes with that. So since this is now being held by Public Health and Social Services, and it's been over a year since that, we wanted to do our due diligence on bringing that forward. So Northwest Integrated Health will be doing telehealth through the jail program, and we'll be working collaboratively with Northwest Integrated Health, the jail, and with their contracted third-party healthcare provider, HDS, who will be doing the physical dosing and the medications daily. And so Northwest just finalized their contract with the Nisqually Jail as well, so there'll be cohesive services throughout Thurston County, and I know that was an issue last time of they were not necessarily local. But they are also opening up 2 clinics locally, one in Tumwater and one in Olympia, and that's estimated to happen this summer. So the good news about this is that they'll be able to provide that continuity of care for people upon release, but they'll still provide coordination for folks who prefer to go somewhere else, and they will help in that transition as well too. So this contract will include monthly reporting to gather metrics to be able to track utilization, as well as provide data both to you and the Opioid Abatement Council, as well as to the public, which is one of our One Washington memo requirements to have that dashboard and provide that information publicly. And this data will ensure that we're meeting all the legal requirements of the settlement funds. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I appreciate looking into using the opioid abatement settlement funds for this. And, you know, we've had a lot of different discussions. I know that the question was still out there. I know there was like some concerns with the different type of MOUD treatment medications that were going to be offered. There was a Department of Justice memo that was dated from quite a while ago saying that all medications need to be offered. Otherwise, it's in violation of the ADA agreements. That was a Department of Justice opinion. There was a question that we put out, is that still the Department of Justice's opinion? And I don't know that we ever got an answer on that.
That's correct, Vice Chair. We have not received an answer. I do believe the PAO's office, Prosecuting Attorney's Office, Civil Division, is still doing outreach to try to get the county a meeting with the Department of Justice to have that conversation.
So, you know, I don't know, so we're going under the assumption that we're being mandated to do this, but we're not sure that we're being mandated to do this?
Dr. Fryheit, does this item encompass what the sheriff's office had brought forward as a standalone item in the past?
Including methadone and not just
Yes.
Suboxone?
Correct, so it handles methadone, naltrexone, and buprenorphine. So all three of the medications that are
I
required.
think the sequencing on that, the last direction we received from the board was that we needed to work that through with the PAO's office and the Department of Justice before actually bringing forward this item. So is there a way that, and ultimately it's up to the board's consideration, but is there a way that we can pause to round up with the PAO's office? Because I think what the confusion on this is we're tracking it on two different fronts. We just had an email chain that from the sheriff's team, they were still trying to work to get that meeting before they brought something forward. Did you recall that?
Yes, that's accurate.
So in my mind, the sheriff's team was still gonna bring something forward, and I didn't realize that it had switched to the Department of Public Health at this time.
Yeah, and this had to because now we're the ones paying for that through the settlement dollars. We're the ones in charge of those settlement dollars.
I think it's a great solution with the access of funds. So, board members, my recommendation would be to keep this on the agenda for now. Let Dr. Fryheit, myself, and the sheriff team round up with the PAO's office, determine where that conversation is at with the Department of Justice, and we can provide an update hopefully before next Tuesday. Make a determination at the next agenda review on Tuesday morning as to whether this item stays or if it needs to be pulled for one meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to know if it's mandatory or not, and, you know, ultimately, we can decide whatever we want, but if, you know, if half of that 380,000 is in the administration of methadone, and there's another use for it for those opioid settlement funds that can benefit the community more, and just, I don't know, I think that would be just at least a conversation to have, and I'd like to know the full picture.
Commissioner Mejia?
Thank you. I'm seeing kind of this conversation like in two tracks, and I think for that first one, kind of what the county manager, I would actually like to have like an executive session and like have all the parties that just hear like, kind of what steps, because I think then financially we'll be able to decide kind of like Commissioner Fournier mentioned in terms of the funding, right? And whether that funding can go out for different purposes. Or, is it something that we have to do and it is required and therefore, kind of stay the same. I appreciate the work that Dr. Fryheit has done in terms of this, but maybe having just a follow-up executive session. It's been a while since we've all come together and met and see kind of what's going on with this.
We'd be happy to work with the PAO's office to schedule that.
Okay, any more input, questions, concerns? I'm okay with that approach myself, so those are important questions to answer. All right, thank you. Next up then is Public Works, sole source purchase of an annual subscription of Link software.
Link?
Matt Oldsman, Thurston County Engineer. Public Works is requesting the Board of County Commissioners award a contract for the renewal of the annual subscription of a proprietary software, Link software from Traffic and Parking Control Company as a sole source vendor for the amount of $24,792. Public Works uses intelligent transportation systems for schools, pedestrians, and overheight signage. This signage has LED enhanced warning systems that require the configuration and maintenance through software programs offered from the original equipment manufacturer. Public Works owns 97 TAPCO signs throughout the county, and these were all purchased through a Department of Enterprises Services cooperative contract. The required Link software to manage the configuration and maintenance directly is not offered through the state contract. The sole source purchase will support the annual renewal of the BlinkLink software to enable the configuration and maintenance of the 97 TAPCO LED enhanced warning signs. A sole source justification was submitted to the internal auditor, who has confirmed that this request meets county policy as well as state law. So these are those flashers that you see in school zones. These are the flashers that you see at crosswalks at roundabouts, the mid-block crossings on like your Yelm highways and your Pacific Avenues. All those signs they're bright, but they require some brains, and this software is the brains of those signs.
Are they like controlled remotely or?
Yeah, so like for our school zones, we actually set those programs from our office at Tilly.
It's all AI.
It is not AI. Thank you for clarifying that.
Questions for Matt on BlinkLink? I keep saying BlinkLink because I like to say it. All right, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, commissioners.
All right, now we've got appointments for committees. Madam
Yes,
Clerk.
this first one is a placeholder AIS on the agenda for this week. On May 18th, the Salary Commission staff received a resignation. That was the day of their first and only meeting this year. However, per RCW 36-17-024, the auditor's office must draw the appointment by lot, and the appointment must be made within 30 days upon vacancy. So the June 16th business meeting is 29 days since the vacancy. So it's the last business meeting to make the appointment. However, we will not have a name until the end of this week, I understand. I believe HR and the auditor's office are working together on that. So this item is just a
Look at it.
placeholder on here, and it will be updated later this week with the name of the appointment.
Okay. No questions on that. Then we'll go to the next one, which is tourism promotion area.
This was an appointment reviewed last week by the board.
Okay. Just being approved from me last week. All right, well, that's those two. And then we got voucher list for May 18th. Okay, next up is temporary voting center MOU.
Commissioners, Auditor Hall, would you like to come up? So this has been, since the, I think, beginning of January, county manager staff and the auditor's team and elections have been meeting to work through an agreement to have a second voting center here, or additional voting center here at the atrium. And some of the items that we've talked about include the traffic circulation, ensuring that all of the operations that take place at the atrium remain accessible to the community. And we've had regular meetings with the auditor's office as we've worked through some of those details. The MOU outlines those specific items and also gives some specific dates. So this is through November 4th of 2026. It covers the primary election for July 24th to August 5th, and the 2026 general election, which is October 23rd to November 4th. The board has rearranged their calendar for a couple of the board meetings to accommodate the usage of the boardroom. And we have also blocked off the Lacey and Tumwater rooms as well. I don't know, Auditor Hall, if you had anything else you wanted to add, or?
I just appreciate the use of the space. We were at the Lacey Library, which was way too small. We had 3.5-hour waits, served our last customer at about 11 o'clock in 2024, pretty late. And it's been great working with county staff, Jennifer, and central services, so.
questions?
I've been in a couple of the meetings and, you know, I've heard a lot of the concerns from staff and I don't know that they're all resolved. So,
What concerns?
traffic, disruption of access to county services, because, you know, we've still got to maintain this building and do all the other things that the county does at the same time. And so, you know, an influx of how many potential people?
In the primary, I don't think it's going to be that disruptive. That, of course, is up to the campaigns. We have a couple contested races, but, you know, the campaigns are really who drive turnout in primary elections. The general election, they're saying, is going to be one of the busiest midterms we've seen in history. So this is new territory for us. I'm not confident going off prior statistics. In 2024, we did have 3.5-hour waits at both voting centers. Most of that starts in late afternoon and goes into the evening. We are very accustomed to working with the cities to modify traffic flow on the streets. This is not our first rodeo with that, so we've already been in contact with the City of Olympia. We were working with Intercity Transit for parking. They have a lot that is down the road past the food co-op that they have said we could park in. They're also looking at parking next door to see what they might be able to free up, but of course that's still under construction. And that's why there's a lot of discussion about making Election Day a national holiday, because parking is always an issue. And what we did in 2024 at the Ballot Processing Center was we actually had all staff park at Family Justice Center. And then we rented vans from Intercity Transit and basically just ran a shuttle all the time, back and forth.
So I know that like when we were first approached about this, it was kind of like, hey, we'd like to use a room. And the board was like, oh, yeah, using a room, no big deal. But this is kind of morphed into something that's much bigger than that. At one point, the proposal was to shut this building down for a week and require all staff to work from home for a week.
I'm not, I didn't request that.
I don't
so.
think that's the proposal anymore.
No, what I had requested is, you know, so if you would allow staff to telework on Election Day, you know, that wouldn't be a bad thing. I don't know how common that is in other departments. My office works very effectively from home. Yeah, it's, you know, elections happen every 2 years for federal elections. So it, you know, the county, I hope, will cooperate and participate in our democracy and be a good partner.
And that's what we're trying to make sure happens.
Exactly. And I think there's a lot of thought that went into this MOU.
Sure. And then I believe the expectation now is for all staff to park somewhere else and be bussed in by buses. And so like, I think that this is gonna be kind of a cluster, just because there's a lot going on, as you said. And I would like, before we pass this, to sit down and have a presentation from you on exactly what it's gonna look like, including like what the traffic study says, how that's gonna be handled, because this parking lot's a mess on any day.
I can explain that to you now,
well,
what it's going to look
And
like.
so I'd like
Our
to.
primary is not very far away, so I would actually feel a lot more comfortable to get this ironed out unless, or I would feel the need to look for an alternate facility, because if we don't have a facility locked down, our military ballots go out very soon.
We've had a secondary facility until now, and we're looking for alternate ones, and we're trying to make this work, right? And so all I'm asking is that we quickly set aside some time where we can look at the traffic study, look at what the parking lot plans are. Everybody understands in this building that they're gonna be expected to park off-site the day of, so we're not surprising anyone. And again, I think it's gonna be a bit of a cluster. It's hard, you know?
It's
And-
hard for us. We do that.
and I
This is
want-
not our first rodeo.
Well, it's everyone else's first rodeo.
Yeah,
And so I just want it clear that it's gonna cause disruption, and we all need to understand that ahead of time. If everybody's on board with that, then okay. But I don't want any surprises, and I know that like some of this planning has changed and evolved in the last year.
We're actually modeling this after the exact plan that we had during the 2024 presidential election.
So it should be an easy presentation to make then.
I would hope to make it right now, which I can answer any questions that you have. Emmett is also working on, he does all the signage. We'll be doing a tremendous amount of communication to staff, to the public. Intercity Transit has offered to have a concierge at the Park and Ride if people wanted to take the bus from the Martin Way Park and Ride here. Or the lot up the street is quite large, and we would staff, I would personally staff, and we would get the vehicles from Intercity Transit to run shuttles, which would take 3-4 minutes to shuttle people from that parking lot here.
You're gonna
There's
personally
also the
staff
parking lot
buses?
across the street, that people could park in. And we've discussed with them with some full-time staff being able to park at the facility just next door at Intercity Transit.
Commissioner Mejia, I saw your hand.
Thank you. Thank you, Auditor Hall. I'm wondering, and I apologize if I missed this. So the location in Lacey, that would not be moving forward this year. It would just be this location.
That is correct. That was too small. There's also, I have no contacts any longer with Timberland Regional Library since the executive director left. But it was very disruptive to library customers. There was not enough parking. There were multiple entrances into that area. So it was not an ideal space for this size of election.
Okay.
But this is not a multi-year
Commissioner Mejia
MOU.
has the floor.
This is a one-time MOU.
Thank you.
Commissioner Klaus.
Thank you. I think this is a great idea. I'm in full support of it. I think increasing access to in-person voting services is extremely important, and I trust the auditor's team to do it with integrity. Like the auditor said, it's not their first rodeo, and I do understand and appreciate the need to respect staff's time and their experience too, and making sure that they know in advance what's going to be happening. But this is in August, so I think there's plenty of time for the management team and the auditor's team and all the directors in the atrium to relay the message to their staff on an appropriate timeline. So I don't have any issues with this item, but I think if there are follow-up questions that aren't answered today, I'd be okay with an e-brief versus having another in-person presentation in the interest of time.
Commissioner Fournier.
So there was a question about, is this a multi-year MOU? I don't believe this is a one-time.
So Thurston County is at the size that one voting center is not sufficient for midterm or presidential elections. So, our expectation is that when you move to the new building downtown, that we would also have that as a voting center in general elections. I mean, it is up to, the county is obligated to provide facilities to conduct elections.
Yes, but the question was, is this a multi-year agreement for the atrium to be used?
This is a single-year agreement.
Okay.
This is for this year only.
Commissioner Mejia.
Thank you. Auditor Hall, I'm wondering, and maybe this just kind of goes, conversation for the future of would, seeing that Lacey is, one of their biggest cities, a location, wouldn't location there or maybe South County be looking into kind of the future be more appropriate?
So we considered that. It would be incredibly expensive because we have to put in a very secure network. When we're at South Puget Sound Community College, we literally pulled cable between buildings to establish that voting center. So we looked at prices to secure that. Would be very difficult. We would need around the clock law enforcement for security purposes. We would need the county to establish a secure network. And there are, you know, the space is not free at these locations. So we did consider that. And in lieu of the budget issue that the county has, this is the best option. So, and to be perfectly honest, I'm a little surprised. This was supposed to be a consent agenda, so I was not prepared to come with a presentation, or I would have. But again, this is not my first rodeo. I can answer any questions down to the minutest detail of how we are going to deal with these elections. Because I've been doing this for 30 years. And the first drive-through that I was a part of was in 2012. So we are accustomed to this, and that was in Pierce County. Employees also parked off-site at a hospital that was about a mile away.
Chair.
Commissioner Mejia, are you done?
Yeah, I was just wondering about like, you know, alternate locations for future years and, you know, but not really for this year.
Well, we would hope that downtown, or, I mean, if the sheriff has a big space, that would be a fantastic place. Although it may intimidate some people, may not want to go there. I haven't thought through that.
Do you have something, Jennifer?
So it was mentioned that this was disruptive to library patrons, so it's probably safe to assume that this would be disruptive to all of our users of this facility. Have we done any kind of survey or asked department heads what, if there are any other big things going on during this time that they would need to either postpone, put off, prepare for?
The other thing that's going on at the time of this election is it's tax time. So it is going to be very, very busy the Monday before election.
Tax time, and then there's some training for EMS that Ben's team is looking into, and how they might navigate through that. We have asked all of the department heads, I believe Auditor Hall was talking to the elected officials, but we have asked all of the department heads, we gave them a heads up on the dates. And as the appointing authorities, they determine whether there's the ability to telework or not. Some of those activities, there are in-person services, but the department heads are evaluating that. I want to go back to the parking and traffic control. So the auditor's team is developing a traffic control plan for the exterior site. That's to address ingress, egress, and vehicle circulation. And I think we'll be providing copies of that when that's ready. Is that correct?
Sure. I mean, we pretty much have that nailed down. We're happy to put graphic detail to it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just, that's a part of the agreement, but just trying to, there should be something that's provided that could be shared.
And that, so we don't have that yet, though. And will that involve?
We don't have a graphic rendition of it, no.
Can you give us like a high-level overview?
Sure.
Thank you.
So a lot of this happens on election day. So 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock on election day, traffic will be rerouted one way on several streets around this building. We've talked to our partners at Intercity Transit. This isn't the first rodeo for Olympia Police because we've worked with them on the city of Olympia. We've worked with them in prior elections. So the entrance to this facility will be off of Patterson, and there will be no entrance from Pacific Avenue. So there will be detour signs. It will be blocked off. We'll probably have traffic people there. So they would be entering through the Patterson. If they are there to vote and get a ballot, they will continue straight. If they are there to drop off a ballot at the drop box, they will turn towards Pacific Avenue because the drop box is on that circle right there. So that will be the flow. They will need to exit out of Pacific Avenue, and that will be a right turn only. So that's how the traffic will flow, okay? Buses will be routed down, I don't know what the street is, that's beyond Pattison. Did anybody know what that street name is? Whatever that is, the next street over. Any bus traffic going back to intercity transit will take that street, go down there, turn right on Martin, right on Pattison, and then enter intercity transit. And that has been discussed and agreed to by the executive director at intercity transit. On Thursday, Friday, we're not gonna have that issue. Monday, we won't be closing the roads or rerouting either. Tuesday is really the big day that we are talking about. Monday is an unknown. I think it will be steady, but parking here is an issue. There are not a lot of parking places, even for staff, and we're all aware of that. Which is why, we didn't ask, but Intercity Transit offered to, put a concierge, and apparently that is one of their staff people that, talks to people coming to ride the bus of where you're going, this is a bus you get on. And it's a straight shot. Or they can park up the road, or the lot across the street. But our hope is to keep this lot free for customers. And keep in mind that it's not only going to be people coming to vote, but it is going to be people coming to pay their taxes on Monday, because that that is an allowable date. It's not past the deadline this year for people to pay their taxes on a Monday. And I've had many conversations with Treasurer Gadman.
So there'll be an alternate line for people coming in to pay
There will
property
be, so the way the building is designed, they will still need to enter through the auditor's office, but they will actually exit through the assessor's office. There's a door that goes straight. So that traffic will be one way as well for people coming to pay their taxes. They will not be turning around and going the other way. So, because there will inevitably be lines for taxes as well. So the assessor has graciously agreed to allow access through that door between the treasurer's office and the assessor's office, so they can exit out their lobby.
And this will require, you mentioned OPD, this will require a police presence for traffic or for security or for?
That's really up to them. There will be signage and the roads will be one way. Whether or not they have police or traffic control here directing traffic is really up to them. I'm trying to, I would have had Tilly here if I knew that this was gonna be a department item, but it was, I was told it was a consent agenda. When we closed the roads up on the hill, when we were in that bank building, I don't know if the city was on site or not. But we also rerouted traffic up at, the courthouse. So, yeah.
Is there, I know it was on the department, it was gonna go to consent. Is there value to having it on a department item so people hear that what's going on? Or is it still your preference to have it as a consent item, or do you care?
Well, I'm happy to come back and do a presentation. One thing to keep in mind is our voters pamphlet is already at the printer. So, and it has this facility in it because we've been working with Jennifer since January. And I know I've talked to each of you about this as well. So it's very difficult for us to change directions at this time if this is not something that you want to move forward with.
I'm not here, Commissioner Forney, I don't know where he's at. I'm not hearing anyone else that does want to move forward. I'm just trying to see where, how it should be on the agenda. So that today's agenda setting.
I just
I'm
have,
happy to come and do a presentation next week if you'd like.
I would like that. I'm expressing reservations. I think that, and I've been in multiple conversations during this thing, and there's been staff reservations the whole time. So it is not, this has been something that has been, I think questionable, just because there's no way to get around disrupting everything else that goes on around here. No matter how many cones you put up or how many police officers you bring in, it's gonna be disruptive to the other county operations. And I just wanna make sure that everyone understands that, and everybody, if it's gonna be harder on staff, and it will be, I want them to understand that plenty of ahead of time. So the more-
Democracy can be difficult,
I mean,
especially in these times.
And that's
I
why we
agree.
need to talk about it.
Well, that's why we are, and that's why I've been having meetings with your staff.
And I'll go to Commissioner Mejia. I mean, maybe you guys can have a meeting. I don't really want to have another meeting about it. Take your kid to work day is pretty disruptive, but we figured out this is super important. And I think you guys have done a lot of work to get the details through, so I'm good to go. Commissioner Mejia?
Thank you. I was just going to suggest maybe keeping it as a department item and then the auditor can come in kind of with a presentation. I think it would be a good way to highlight to the public, I think, the changes and kind of like the first blush of, kind of the changes and kind of like touch on some of the points that have been highlighted today. But I think we're having that like in a board meeting under the department items.
Okay, so.
And I'm happy to communicate with county staff if you'd like us to do that now. In my opinion, that's a little premature. We typically do that as we get closer to the dates to kind of make them aware of what's going on and what their options are.
We have
and
language
any
in the
additional
MOU
services
that
we can.
addresses who's gonna do what, right? It specifically addresses who's gonna do what in the communication and the coordination
Sure.
on communication.
But if the commission would like that a little earlier, we're certainly open to that.
Is there any problem?
I think more communication is better, and putting it on, keeping it on department items, and then allowing the auditor to come Tuesday and, present to the public on it, I think that's all good. I think we need to just make sure everybody understands what's going on. So that satisfies me.
Be
Okay.
great plug for the election. Hopefully we have a good
Exactly.
turnout.
Yeah, all right, so it'll stay on the agenda, department item, a little bit of background for the public on Tuesday. We're good to go.
And I'm okay moving forward with our voter pamphlet. Right?
I'm not
Just
hearing
getting
any
ready to
concern
do
about
press
that.
checks.
Well,
So I would like a vote on that. Is it the details we need to work out? Or are you questioning us using this facility? I guess I'm not clear, and I would like a vote of the board right now. Since we are not going to sign this MOU, are you committed to
Nobody said we're
providing?
not gonna sign it.
Are you, I would like clarification, please.
Auditor Hall. This item is the first reading for the MOU.
I
And so the
understand.
board's asking questions.
I
And
understand.
getting clarification. We're going to modify it, so instead of Central Services Director presenting it, the auditor will present it. And then it is up for the board to take a vote next week, which we've outlined what those items are and who's gonna be doing what. So it's
And
it's
this
really
is the
not appropriate
details.
for
I
the
agree.
board to.
So hear me out. I have spoken to every single commissioner about using this building as well as the county manager. We are very committed and very far down the road producing our materials for this election. They are ready to go at the printer, but I heard from Tilly, they have not started printing yet. I need a vote from the board. Are you committed to allow us to use this facility, please?
That is
Or
what
I will
the
tell the public that we do not know exactly where we're going to be.
That is what the
Because I'm
MOU
not
is
comfortable
for
spending
Tuesday.
hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars without having a commitment from the board that this facility is available for the primary and general election.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Flannery?
So this is the first time we've had it on the agenda. The way public process works is this gets presented to the public, we talk about it, there's opportunity for public comment, and then on Tuesday, we have the opportunity to vote on it. So we can't take a vote on a vote we're gonna take in the future.
Commissioner Klaus?
Thank you, Chair. The process, has been explained a few times, and I know the auditor's been around for quite a while, so she totally knows the process. Even though we can't take a vote today right now, I just want to let auditor and everyone who's listening know that I'm completely comfortable moving forward with it. So if there was a space for a vote, I would be voting yes, let's move forward. But, of course, we have to go through the motions. So, that's where I'm at.
Commissioner Mejia?
Commissioner Grant and Commissioner Mejia and Commissioner.
Thank you. No, I was just going to kind of mention what Commissioner Fournier mentioned in the thing that we cannot take a pre-vote for it. I don't think that the board is at least from my end, and kind of from the questions I've heard, it's more of like asking about the process and clarification. Auditor Hall, you've talked to me about this before, but I haven't been involved in those meetings, so I don't know how it's gone. And so I was just curious about some of the technicalities that, we haven't discussed. And so I appreciated the conversation today. I don't think it's the conversation was about, you know, your expertise or, um, the use of the atrium. It was more about just the technicalities of things and how it's all going to work out. So I did appreciate the conversation today. I know we're not allowed to pre-vote, and like I mentioned before, it was just really good information for us to have, and I'll be ready to move forward on this item.
Mr. Grant?
I just want to pop in and say that, I'm completely ready to move forward, and you have my full support to get things done. So just want to make sure I had voiced a little bit there too.
So I think you have at least 4 commissioners that are committing to you that this is moving forward. I mean, so that's, I think, the best we can do.
All right. And we will go to print.
Yes, thank you. Next up is Community Planning, Economic Development, Ordinance for Moratorium on Detention Facilities.
Again, Ashley Rye, Director of CPED, and I'm joined by Andrew Bond, our Community Development Manager, to answer questions. So the board provided direction on this item back in March to develop a moratorium related to federal detention centers. Since then, our team reviewed 2 other counties that also put in place moratoriums. That's Pierce and King counties. We consulted with our legal counsel. We've been working really closely with Travis Burns in the prosecuting attorney's office, and also assessed any impacts to our current or potential projects on the horizon relating to this moratorium. One of the things we found out in our review of the 2 other counties and in working with legal counsel is that we can't restrict this moratorium to only federal detention centers. It will need to apply more broadly to public and private detention centers. We also work through some issues with an existing special use permit that we have for an expansion of Maple Lane. So we did put in place a provision in the moratorium for an exception for that facility that's currently operating. But for full disclosure with the board, for the board's consideration, putting in place this moratorium for a year could potentially impact ongoing discussions about any kind of regional juvenile detention facility. I mentioned the year, that the moratorium would be in place for a year, as long as we have a work plan in place that indicates that we'll be working on code updates within that timeframe. This is just the first action the board would take. You can go ahead and place a moratorium without holding a public hearing, but we will have to hold a public hearing within 60 days of that action. So either at your June 23rd meeting or one right after your recess, you'll also see the scheduling of a public hearing, and that is a required component of putting in place a moratorium. And then, as we discussed when we were doing docketing, we will look at developing code provisions specific to detention centers as part of our new uses and standards docket item. And so that would come before you probably later this year or early next year once we go through the full process with the Planning Commission. Happy to answer questions.
I don't know if anyone else was at the meeting that was held right here about the state's, I was there, but I had to leave halfway through, about the state's plans for dealing with juvenile capacity. And I don't recall there being any plan for a Thurston County, like of all the different things they were looking at. I don't recall Thurston County being part of the solutions that were on the table, just for whatever that worth. If anybody remembers differently, let me know.
I don't recall either, Chair, but we can double check with our juvenile court just to make sure.
The state's solution was adding in capacity out at Stafford Creek. They created it's because they have they were keeping juveniles in juvenile detention centers to like 25 years old. And so the 18 to 25-year-olds, a lot of them were moved out to Stafford Creek for the capacity issues. But, you know, and I mean, this is only a year, and we've talked about Regional Juvenile Justice Center teaming up with Mason County and Grace Harbor County, who have failing juvies, and we have an empty juvie. And then we're talking about our jail space needs, that we've got some. But none of those solutions would come forth in a year. If any of those things were to be options for us to move on, those would be 2-3 years out. So I don't know that would interfere with anything that's being worked on as far as jail space. I am curious, when this says, involuntary confinement, would this also cover like private residential, like with the sexual violent predators and other things of that nature that are kind of, no?
It wasn't considered in part of this ordinance. It's kind of a separate classification through the state as like a housing class. This is solely based on like a joint confinement setting where you can see like a jail, federal detention facility, or anything in between. But we could go back and take a look at that.
So that, you know, there's a lot of halfway houses when, you know, kids get released from Green Hill, they have to go stay for a year in a facility. This wouldn't prohibit that type of thing. This wouldn't.
Not as written, no.
Other questions from the board?
And this wouldn't affect any tribal facilities. Those are my questions.
Yeah, I'm just looking for anybody else. I guess no other questions.
Thank you.
Public Health and Social Services 2026 Encampment Resolution Program Amendments.
Good morning. Jen Freiheit, Public Health and Social Services Director. And the next two items reflect recommendations from the Regional Housing Council regarding funding for the homeless response system. And this is for the period of July 2026 through June 27, so one program year. And these include a mix of contract renewals and new contracts. The recommendations for affordable housing capital projects will be presented next week as part of the HUD Annual Action Plan. So item number, this current item is an amendment with Interfaith Works and Low Income Housing Institute, or LEHI, to fund 3 projects under the ERP, or Encampment Resolution Program. And this is also what we brought on May 19th during a work session. So the Washington State Department of Commerce has issued Thurston County a contract valued for a 2-year value of $7,600,000. And as a region, Thurston County and Olympia together, the 1-year total is $5,576,751. So the Regional Housing Council met on May 14th to recommend moving this forward. And you will see that it has Interfaith Works with Sandy's Flats for approximately $530,000. LEHI for Maple Court at approximately $3 million, and LEHI with Lotus Court at $77,522 for a total of $3,601,502 for 1 year. And I'll just note that the Regional Housing Council also recommended that the City of Olympia receive ERP funding for operations of the Franz Anderson Tiny Home Village, City of Olympia Outreach Team, and Administration. And that left a balance of $290,815, which remains unallocated as the Regional Housing Council will consider options for the best use of those dollars. So this is not dollars that can be kept aside as a reserve, only because they must be spent by the end of June of next year, 2027, and it can only be spent on ERP activities. I'm happy to answer any questions on that one, or I can combine it with the next one if you like.
These meant to be remodeled projects. Excuse me, Chair.
Any questions from the board?
I just want to say that for these last two, I really appreciate the presentation that you guys gave. It answered a lot of my questions, if not all of them. And, you know, this is a lot of money. So you guys did a really good job presenting. How will you present this to the public on Tuesday?
Basically in that same format, unless you feel there's a different way.
That's perfect. Thank you.
I agree, Vice Chair Poirier, that our Listing Housing team has done a fantastic job of rounding this information up. I know that Tom Webster, who's in the audience, is also doing a lot of work with Regional Housing Council. As many know, it's a fairly new seated Regional Housing Council. There's a lot of education that he is willingly jumping in and helping to restructure things so that things flow better. That's not always the fun and exciting stuff, but it is quite taxing to work that through. But what we're seeing is a more informed Regional Housing Council, which then in turn takes information back to their respective bodies. And I just want to give him a special thanks, him and his staff. I see Jackie in the audience as well, because I'm also thinking of the Maple Court work and the site visits, all this extra work we're doing to be better partners, engaging with our providers, engaging with our city stakeholders. And it was, I thought, really great that City Manager Rick Walk at the last Three Cities meeting gave a special acknowledgement to the work that's being done in this area and the improvements that people are noticing. So that's not always, we don't always get to hear the positives like that from folks. So I just wanted to pass that on publicly.
So for clarity, it might, like, if you read the item, it's talking about to fund 3 projects. But as you name the projects, these are not building something new or doing something new. These are operational dollars for
Correct.
projects that we've already got up and running.
Correct.
And that's Sandy Flats, Maple Court, Lotus Court. You also mentioned some operational dollars for Franz Anderson.
Coming straight out of the Olympia.
All projects that have been conceived, developed, and these are essentially operational funding.
Correct.
Just to clarify that, so people don't,
Yep.
when you say project, people don't know if that's something new or what. Okay, so, and this is money that going back to many conversations, this is money that we secured from the state on 3 years, and then we advocated for extension of that, and this is what resulted from that advocacy and an extension of that original 3-year commitment to these projects to clear encampments off state right-of-ways. Okay, so it's kind of a separate stream from all the like other types of funding that we get in Thurston County from document recording fees and things like that. Okay, so that's item 1 under public health. Any other questions from the board before we go to item 2? Okay, item 2 is homeless services contracts.
Yes, and this is looking to approve the homeless service contracts and contract amendments with 17 nonprofit organizations and 49 contracts for a total amount of $15,290,037. And again, this is for the 1 program year through June 30th of 2027. And this was also detailed out on that May 19th board work session as well. Just for a recap, on July 15, 2025, the Board of County Commissioners approved contracts for homeless services for a total amount of $14,696,319. These were 2-year awards with 1 year of funding. A second year of funding may be approved if funding is available and performance was satisfactory. The funding sources for these contracts are multiple: Consolidated Homeless Grant, Housing and Essential Needs, or HEN, Eviction Prevention Rent Assistance, Emergency Housing Fund, Human Services Fund, HB 5386, and Local Home Funds. And the Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention notified the HASAB, or the Homeless Services Advisory Board, who met on March 16th to make recommendations for this second year of funding. And then on April 22nd, brought that to the Regional Housing Council, who approved to bring this recommendation forward here today. And so in the packet, you will see all of those 17 and 49 listed out and their dollar amounts. I'm happy to answer any questions for you on those.
Questions on this item?
Nope, just thank you again for the presentation. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Public Works, contract award for 183rd Avenue Southwest.
Good morning.
Good morning. Matt Osmond, Thurston County Engineer.
Karen Weiss, Public Works Director.
Public Works is requesting the Board of County Commissioners award the contract for the 183rd Avenue Southwest, US 12 to Sargent Road, Phase 1 project to Active Construction of Puyallup, Washington, in the amount of $2,075,075. On May 21st, 2026, a total of 7 bids were received in response to a call for sealed bids. The pavement condition of this portion of 183rd, if you have not driven on it, has deteriorated and is in very poor condition and actually beyond any sort of a preservation treatment and must be completely rebuilt. The current average traffic volume is just under 3,700 vehicles per day. The existing road has minimal shoulders to accommodate bicyclists and pedestrians, or even errant vehicles. The proposed project will include a single travel lane in each direction with 5-foot shoulders. Other improvements include guardrail installation to mitigate steep slopes and stormwater improvements. To accommodate roadway widening, stormwater facilities, and utilities relocation, 63 trees will need to be removed from the county right-of-way. 20 of these are oak trees, which will be mitigated at a ratio of 3-to-1 as conditioned by the Thurston County, or as conditioned by the hearings examiner. This results in 60 tree plantings being planted within the project limits as part of the project. Public Works received a grant of $2.2 million from the County Road Administration Board for this project. The remaining costs will come from a combination of county funds, including the county road fund, transportation impact fees, and storm and surface water utility funds. Public outreach elements of this project included a public open house regarding project impacts, meetings with adjacent property owners. A project webpage is available on the Public Works webpage, and social media posts. Numerous notifications were also sent out as part of the SEPA process, and for the public hearing associated with the SEPA process as well. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on this contract award? Oh, good job. All right, that's the end of the substantive items. We'll have general public comment and commissioner committee reports. And that takes care of June 16th. So next up is advisory board's update.
Thank you, Chair. There's just one advisory board to touch on today. That is the Housing Authority of Thurston County, or Hatch. We have since November received 5 applications for Hatch. Those have all been provided to their board, and they have reviewed them all. The Hatch recommendation is to reappoint the incumbent, who is Lisa Vatsky. There were some sensitivities regarding this that were shared in a previous email to you from staff at Hatch. But this is here for your consideration today.
Okay. It's a pleasure of the board. Ms. Vatsky was my recruit based on a recommendation from some people, and given that the board is recommending her to stay on, that's going to be my preference. Anyone else?
I can go with that. There's multiple good applicants on here, but if with the board's recommendation, I would stick with that.
Any opposition to Ms. Vatsky staying on? Is there any other advocacy? Commissioner Mejia? Just thumbs up.
Yeah, there were a lot of good applicants, but if that's the board's recommendation, I'm good with keeping it.
Commissioner Claus, Commissioner Grant, 5 thumbs up.
Okay, wonderful. This will be added to next week's business meeting agenda.
Thank you. And that's the only one we have to address then?
The only one today.
Perfect. Let's go to Commissioner, or no, the next one is net gain framework.
Thank you so much, Chair. We have our team from CPED, leadership team here to talk about a couple items that were on the agenda that are noteworthy. We mentioned, as the board approved them last time, that we bring forward just some more explanation and some call out as to the important efforts that are underway in CPED. So I'll hand over now to the director.
Hello, Ashley Rice, CPED Director, and I'm joined today by Derek Day, our Community Planning Manager, and Senior Planner Andrew DeFobis, who know all the details better than I do around this particular grant. I do want to start, though, by thanking the board for their continued leadership and commitment to forward-thinking water resource planning. The investments that are being made today here in this county position position us to proactively address future water supply, environmental stewardship, and growth management challenges. In just the last 6 months, the board has accepted nearly $3.64 million in grant funding dedicated to water resource planning and implementation efforts. And these funds do allow the county to continue advancing your priority initiatives despite our challenging fiscal environment and increasing demands on local government services. These investments establish a foundation for long-term success. While much of this work occurs behind the scenes by Derek and his team, it creates the data, the partnerships, the planning frameworks, and implementation strategies that are necessary to support our sustainable growth and resource management for the long term. At this point, I'll turn it over to Derek, and we'll get into, I don't want to say, what is the equivalent of weeds for water resources?
We can talk about weeds.
We can talk about
call
weeds.
it the weeds.
Okay. Exactly.
All right. So this actually, I just want to highlight really quickly, this is actually a picture of the county broken out by watersheds. So we've got our Chehalis Basin, we have our Summit Lake and Eld Inlet, we've got Deschutes, we didn't really count Woodard and Woodlands, are kind of their own little ones.
Is there a key somewhere?
There's also Nisqually.
Is it hidden by the names?
There is not a key in here.
Oh.
These are all just different watersheds delineated by
map.
different colors. This is a really cool map. This was made by our one and only Kevin Hansen.
Can you send me that?
He makes great maps. Yes, we can make sure you get a copy of that.
Maps.
With a key.
With a key. I love maps.
But back to the rest of the presentation. So today we're going to talk about what net gain is. It's a little bit of an obscure phrase for a lot of folks. We're going to talk about some background and history of the project, the scope of what we're really trying to accomplish with this one, and how it's affiliated with partnerships that we've created for it, or partnerships that we're gonna bring to bear on this project. So what is net gain? Net gain is a phrase that comes out of some of our regulatory responsibilities. So it comes out of Growth Management Act, the Shoreline Management Act. We are supposed to, as a county, assure that there is no net loss. That's where we start. That's kind of the baseline of ecosystem functions and values. That comes out of growth management. We also actually have some other responsibilities that actually do require us to really kind of move the bar up a little bit. Those would include things like our municipal stormwater permit, our responsibilities under the Clean Water Act. No net loss really operates at a project-by-project scale. It's really small, it's really narrow. It really focuses on what you do when an individual project comes into the permit counter and how you condition that project to really make sure that you're not losing ecosystem function. And that's a really tall order to do on a project-by-project scale. Across most of these programs, even if you go into the Department of Ecology's municipal stormwater permit, you're gonna find a big caveat right at the beginning that says, even if we do all of these things, we're going to lose some function. So there's this kind of conundrum where it is really hard, even if we have really closely tailored, really kind of perfect as we can get development regulations, there's a risk with all of it. Either that we don't know is happening or that we could even anticipate but not really remediate. So while we're talking about individual developments, even if we're achieving that regulatory compliance, if you zoom way out and you look at the landscape, you might still see a loss of some function via cumulative impacts or some of those things that are just there really aren't the tools for us to even manage at that site scale. We also have the challenge that a lot of historic development was done under different regulatory regimes. We didn't even have modern stormwater management until the 1990s. So if you think about the way that the county and the region has developed, we have a lot really that we're kind of hole that we're kind of digging out of, and maintaining those kind of current conditions really don't even get us above that baseline. So we might start to dig ourselves out a little bit, but it's really not built for that. So we end up looking at kind of these performance metrics for compliance. and not really what's happening at an ecosystem scale. So what's actually happening with wetlands, what's actually happening with tree canopy in the county, what's actually happening with salmon in our streams. So it really doesn't focus on that ecosystem health. It focuses on that kind of project by project basis. And what we're looking to do is we're looking to really be able to take an innovative look at a problem like this. This is something that's really not happening. The state has been struggling with this for some time. So we're trying to really think about what would it take, how can we zoom out and think about net gain? So can we, if we stop focusing on individual projects as kind of that metric for where we're trying to measure success, if we can zoom out and look at kind of all of the regulatory programs together, all of the other programming that we do, all of the good things that we do on the landscape, and what is the sum total of all of the work that we're doing together. So not just each program by program, but what's really happening on the landscape. And that's really the opportunity here, is to zoom out and look at how everything works together and how the landscape responds. So loss or gain of what? That's really an important question here. So we're thinking about ecosystem functions and values. Those are the things that we're really responsible for. That looks like habitat, that looks like stormwater management, tree canopy, wetlands, groundwater availability, water quality, and possibly more. Part of this project is to do a really kind of deep dive inventory of all of the things that we're looking to protect or looking to restore. So that's part of what we're doing, and we might find that there are more there. A little bit of background in history. I mentioned that the state has struggled with this for quite some time, going back to, I think, 2019 were some of the first attempts that they made via the legislature and state agencies to come up with a framework for net ecological gain. There were a couple of missteps early on where there was kind of a lack of understanding of the limitations of local government regulatory systems and where they run into problems like regulatory takings. So that the state has really essentially not found a way to really understand this problem and find a way to really think about what net gain would look like at a local level. So we understand this as, you know, we see a lot of growing interest in the community. We have a community that really, I think, wants probably more than just the bare minimum protection. We want to see a Thurston County that that we leave better than we found it. We got a grant of nearly $500,000 to work on this project, which is actually pretty similar to the money that the state spent trying to figure this problem out through the Department of Fish and Wildlife. But we got a grant from the Department of Commerce from the Salmon Recovery and Local Planning program that comes from the Climate Commitment Act. So we have a grant to create a prototype for this. So to be clear, and it's a little bit covered up here in some of these, but no, it's all there. So this project really is to create a framework for net ecological gain. We won't really be able to, at the end of this project, be able to come up with an answer, but we'll have a framework where we can understand which values we're trying to track, what metrics we might have that we can track them by, and then how we would assess whether or not we are gaining or losing ground ecologically. And where, because it might be different in different parts of an ecosystem. We might be gaining tree canopy, for example, and losing wetland function, just as an example. So we're not exactly recreating any wheels here. This isn't completely uncharted territory. We do have a really good example of where this type of approach is happening, and we would say working. So the voluntary stewardship program you might be familiar with. This is in relationship to our critical areas ordinances in agriculture, and it's a performance-based system that looks at outcomes. So it's less about it's less about the upfront regulations. It's more about voluntary BMPs and implementation, and then we try and figure out what it looks like on the landscape. So what's actually happening with ecosystem function. So it's this performance-based system where we use voluntary BMPs and funding to try and make sure that we are meeting that no net loss. So it looks at function at a watershed scale. So this is actually a model that we're using to, we're kind of benchmarking off of. This is something that we think we can extrapolate out further across the county's programs and really do a much broader inventory of programs and their effectiveness and what the ecosystem is doing in response to the work that we're doing. And I also want to mention that this is a partnership with the Thurston Conservation District, this project is. They'll be partnering with us to help develop this framework and use some of their experience with that VSP program as a model. So how does it work? We're essentially trying to create a ledger here where we've got debits and credits, and at the end, we'd be able to understand what our balance is, whether we're positive or negative. And then everybody loves coupons. Coupons kind of operate in this metaphor in the middle. These look like development regulations, operations and maintenance, and best management practice. And through coupons, we might get 95% of our environmental impact off if we've dialed it correctly, or we might be able to get to 100. So those are ways that we can kind of buy down the environmental cost of the things that we would otherwise understand as debits. Things like development, day-to-day impacts that happen from the way people use their land. Climate change is a big driver of ecosystem function as well. We have ways that we can kind of ameliorate some of that. That's what I'm calling coupons in our metaphor here. And then we have credits. We also have programs where we are doing ecosystem scale restoration on the landscape. Individual projects or large parts of larger initiatives. We have restoration projects that we might be funding, salmon recovery work that happens locally, and it's not just us that's operating in this landscape either. We also have things like infrastructure upgrades when we do a stormwater retrofit. We also have another opportunity for credit that often doesn't get a lot of play is redevelopment potential. Like I mentioned before, most of the development that we have in the Puget Sound Basin and even locally happened before our modern regulatory systems. So when we redevelop those, they actually come up to the new standards, which is a credit on the landscape. So this will give us a sense of how we can build this system to understand whether or not we are in the positive or the negative.
Before we jump to the next slide, this is really impactful. Actually, I know that you've shared some thoughts about where this can eventually develop into some other ideas. Do you mind sharing a little bit of those right now?
Yeah, so as we're developing a new critical areas ordinance and implementing a new shoreline master program, if we can develop this kind of framework from the outset, how do we use that as part of the ongoing monitoring to demonstrate that we're not just meeting the, box checking exercise of no net loss, but what does net gain look like? And as Derek mentioned, we're not the only holder of that information. This really would be an attempt to pull together all of the great work that's being done in our county and put it in the credit ledger. But it really is looking at all of those regulatory programs and establishing a monitoring framework.
Those regulatory programs we're required to do those.
Yes.
So what you're effectively doing is synthesizing those so that you can actually have an understanding of what's taking place in our county, rather than these individual pieces just functioning out there without any level of connectivity, which then gives us an understanding of if there is a level of credits. I like the coupon with little person that does a splash of creativity. That gives the ability to inform and what does responsible development look like going forward? Can you just speak a little bit about that?
The responsible development piece, I would say it's understanding the role that regulations play versus our programmatic efforts, that regulations might not be the place where we can dial in and address every issue. A good example of that is tree removal on a very, specific site for the building of houses. Like, that might be allowed under state law and our regulatory frameworks. But programmatically, if we are conserving whole swaths of forest land in the reaches the upper watershed might actually have a greater impact on improving ecologic functions and values. And so putting it in this framework of, yes, there's a development happening and there's a debit to our ecological framework, where can we then pick up credits? And acknowledging that we're picking up credits in other places potentially, and more impactful credits. I don't know if you have anything to share on that, Derek.
Yeah, and I think it'll give us, we have, so in the coupons column, there are things that are actually just as simple as county operations, not to say that those are necessarily simple. But we might find that it's, we can balance and make decisions between, do we want to plus up this ledger through a credit, through a restoration system? Do we want to plus it up through, maybe it's an increased operations and maintenance schedule that could get us a similar outcome. So it gives us the ability to understand where all of those functions and values line up across all of our programs and where we might have the most impactful investments as a community. And more to this point, so this does fit in a broader kind of framework that we're starting to use in CPED, across the county, and further. So today we're talking about net gain. It sits right there in the middle. It's actually step 2 in this whole system that we're talking about today. Step 1 is a project that you all have heard about, the Thurston County Integrated Water. That is kind of a baseline collaborative effort. All of this is really about collaboration and scaling it, and we're starting in-house, trying to understand how all of our programs intersect with integrated water, where they all work in the same space, where they're all working towards similar objectives, and try and create ways to really integrate a lot of that work if there are opportunities. So it starts there. Next step, net gain, is really taking all of the different programs on the landscape and understanding what their impact and how they intersect with each other. So that's kind of a step 2. It works with our close collaborators. We're working with the Thurston Conservation District, the Nisqually River Council, state agencies will want to pull into this because I think we're a couple steps ahead of them, and we want them to see what we're working on here, so they don't have new ideas that take us in different directions. And then this all scales at a watershed. So it wasn't an accident that we used that pretty map at the beginning to demonstrate some of the different watershed delineations. All of this scales at a watershed, where you take all of these systems and you put them in a space that makes sense to the ecosystem, which is a watershed. So we can understand how all of these programs work together. We can present a united front as a county, and we can show up in spaces and make decisions with our partners that help us optimize for the kind of outcomes that we're all looking for on the landscape. So this looks like the work that we have docketed for the Nisqually Watershed Planning Project. This is something that we do in the Chehalis Basin with the Chehalis Basin Partnership. This is something we could see in the future for a Deschutes Watershed Council. We could see it in Summit Lake, the Black River Basin. So there are all of these opportunities to take this kind of collaborative work and putting all of these pieces together and then applying them in a landscape that makes sense to the ecosystem. This is where it gets exciting for me. All the pieces together. So what's next? So this is a grant-funded project. We have a number of different steps and deliverables. First step is really going to be working with our kind of closest partner, the Thurston Conservation District. We're going to be working together at the staff level to really kind of identify what this framework looks like, identify all of the different functions and values we're trying to protect, all of the different systems that we have that either are those debits or those credits, and where we have dials around some of those coupons. We're going to be doing stakeholder engagement, both with other kind of community partners that work in the same space, as well as the community, to understand if we're trying to identify metrics that we're going to track, we want those to be associated with things that people can understand and care about. So we're going to do actual kind of on-the-ground focus testing of some of these different metrics that we identify, so they're not too obscure that people couldn't understand why we're trying to protect them. And then we have a report due to the Department of Commerce. That is in June of '27. And then we can return to the board to discuss findings and next steps. So that's our process, and we're open to questions if you have any.
Okay, I have a couple questions. So I went to this like 2-hour webinar thing on the Kitsap County Natural Asset Management. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
So how does this fit with that? Or, I mean, like, it seems kind of like different, same but different in a way. Like, I mean, they're looking at, you know, they've come up with 3 metrics and they've identified certain areas and they're gonna try to track progress over time at that kind of larger scale.
Yeah.
How is this kind of different than what they're trying to do there?
I'll say in a former life, my team funded that project.
Yes.
So very familiar, very familiar with that
Yes.
project. It's a similar type of a system. They kind of started with the almost the administrative system. They basically jumped straight from an asset management framework that you use in kind of more standard gray infrastructure system to try and understand natural assets. It's very similar, and I could see a framework development like this, that being a good administrative tool for something that we wanted to do.
And like when you were showing the slide about, you know, debits, credits, you know, yeah, like, so this slide, how much of this slide is, I mean, is this slide like this kind of like just sort of way of organizing the discussion? Is this your guys' idea with this, or is this, if Commerce handed you something and said, take this and like flesh it out, or you know what I mean? Like, or is this you guys' kind of like, you know, your own sort of work of trying to figure out how to get started?
I would say we sat down with staff from the Conservation District and we said, if we're gonna do net gain, what would it look like and how could we measure it? So this, homegrown, I would call it.
Okay, let's see, I guess that's my question. Commissioner Grant.
Yeah, thanks. This was an amazing presentation. You know, I'm absolutely impressed by this framework, and I'm always really impressed by the work that this staff does. So I just want to say thank you for this. And I wish we could, I just want to mention this, that I wish we could apply this framework to a bunch of other systems across Thurston County. You know, you could apply the same sort of framework to behavioral health, to housing, to criminal justice. But it's a really good way for us to be looking at what work needs to be done and what systems are collaborating. So thank you for doing this presentation.
Other questions? Commissioner Fournier.
Yeah, thank you. I like how this is forward thinking and kind of holistic. But the you know, net gain or net loss, how do you determine the baseline? Right, is there like a scientific way to determine how many trees need to exist? Maybe we got too many, maybe we got too little, you know, or all these other things. Who determines the baseline that we're shooting for that says whether there's a loss or a gain?
We do have ways to, I mean, we could, a whole bunch of different ways. Like, I could talk about this for a long time.
That's a big,
Yeah, I would
right,
say
that's a big consideration,
So for
right?
the voluntary stewardship program, 2013 was the baseline.
2013.
For that particular program, and so we have been tracking since 2013, monitoring both the loss on the landscape, mostly in the spatial realm, or looking at water quality, and then also trying to capture the gains, like what falls in the credit column. And I would say we're really good at managing loss monitoring loss, because that's the regulatory framework that we've been operating under for 30 years. We do not have a good methodology for capturing all of the gains. And that was something that we've been struggling with under the voluntary stewardship program. I'm really excited to see that this county might develop a framework that doesn't just apply in that one setting, but across all of our regulatory frameworks. So we can start telling the story of what we're actually accomplishing here or the challenges we're facing here.
And so the theory is, as proposals come forward and, you know, maybe it's my backyard, you know, it's the property behind me where I like the trees and I want to come in and say, well, you know, no, we can't because Thurston County's not managing, you know, whatever ecological change is enough. We say, no, we are. Look, we're doing all those things. Is that kind of what this tool helps us tell the story of?
I would say informing the board, so as policy decisions are presented to you and you're trying to weigh that feedback that you're receiving, that you can see it within a broader framework, and we would be able to provide you with that data.
Okay, so that's what this would look like in practice, is giving us the data to be able to, hey, look, you've ensured that the tree canopy has remained static since 2013 and.
Yeah, this is really a platform that will inform future policy decisions.
Like a new, like say, a new SMP update, it's like, do we really need to tighten, you know, the dials for even further? Because we're losing, we're slipping backwards, or are we, is our system kind of, is our system kind of working and we can keep things where they are?
And also, like, you'll see it probably even within the next 6 months as you start looking at the critical areas ordinance update, trying to build into it clear and easier pathways for projects that exist in the credit column. Like right now, our state agency partners or conservation partners, they might get caught up in a really expensive permitting process for a conservation project. Well, if you're in the credit column, why would we make you do that? And so there is a very near-term space where, you know, we'll reuse this slide and and we'll try to present to you, like, even within the critical areas ordinance update, where we're trying to help our conservation partners help increase the number of items in the credits column, even as we're, you know, establishing standards for environmental protection.
Okay. Who owns this as a regulatory tool? Because like last week, we were having conversations about if signs were durable enough in somebody's backyard and decisions are being made at the lowest level that maybe didn't need to be being made the way they were. Does this become something that is at a counter somewhere and, you know, permit techs are saying, well, you know, this is a no-name.
Yeah, I would say clear code is a way to address those issues. So keeping that in mind when critical areas ordinance standards come before you, can you understand it when you're reading it? That'll be a test we use there. I would say for this framework, it's the bigger picture. It's informing bigger policy decisions rather than that individual planner in our department trying to just help someone with a permit.
One of the things that San Recovery Council involves kind of go around about in their community, some of these meetings that I know you've been to some of them, but like some of the tribal representatives will always emphasize that, you know, when we're measuring things, like when we're measuring what we're doing, like they always want to see like the ultimate outcome, right? Like it's like we shouldn't, you know, restore a habitat area and then pat ourselves in the back. Like if the fish aren't back, you know, like ultimately it's like, are the fish back in the healthy stream and reproducing and creating those, you know, connections to those ultimate connections to their culture and their treaty rights and stuff. And you get into a lot of different, you know, so like, you know, with, I don't know what the analogy would be, like trees, you know, you could count trees, but like, is the greenhouse gas, like is the sequestration actually occurring and, you know, climate change being mitigated? I mean, whatever the thing is, like really looking at the actual outcome as what we want to see, and not just sort of think that, you know, we're measuring upstream things and we don't really know if it's having the downstream result.
So I would say, this won't advance for me anymore, but on the last slide, so I mentioned that this, now it's moving, second to last slide. So with the integrated watershed planning, this is a place where we can actually do that. So we could take a framework like this with all of the assumptions that we have built into this framework, and then we can model it at the scale of a watershed. So what happens if we turn this dial on development regulations up a little bit? What happens if we change this operations and maintenance schedule? What happens if we restore here? What happens if we purchase land and change forest practices up here? So we can actually start looking at what the implications are for these decisions. And then on the backside is monitoring, because with modeling, every model is wrong and some are useful. But you do want to be able to look at what's actually happening on the ground. And we have a really phenomenal ecosystem monitoring program here at the county. So we have the ability to both make really good scientifically educated guesses about what the impacts will be downstream. So we could know what's going to happen with water quality and flows and how that's going to impact salmon. So we could take and we could make assumptions and model out that kind of ultimate downstream impact of the entirety of the programming that we do, which nobody's doing. So.
Yeah, Kevin Hansen, our hydrogeologist, had his model running yesterday, and it's just pages and pages of code running in the background.
Do counties have like a position or an expert like Kevin working? I mean, is that a typical, every county's got a hydrogeologist, or is that something that we have that others don't? I know there's like, some counties have forestry experts we don't have and whatnot.
Not yet.
Just curious, yeah. But I mean, is hydrogeology something every county has?
I think most counties have this kind of capacity.
For
They contract with somebody if it's smaller or something.
I talked about Thurston County being kind of a Goldilocks size, where we don't have as much heavy bureaucracy as a really big county, and we're just big enough to have really phenomenal resources. So Goldilocks.
It's good sometimes and it's bad sometimes.
Yeah.
It is unique. Okay, anything else for this team?
Thank you.
Okay, hopefully we can finish out and not do a break here. I know it's been a long morning, but all we've got left is committee reports, and so that we don't have a work session tomorrow. So anybody have a external committee report they'd like to share? I looked at my list. I don't think I have anything that I need to bring forward. Commissioner Klaus.
Yeah, I just have a quick one. I'll probably bring back more information next week. So we had a 6-hour strategic planning session with JASCOM yesterday. It was really informative and it went really well. They had a group called Hatching come in and do the retreat with us, and we kind of went over, we did a look back at the strategic plan because we're at the end of the 5-year strategic plan now. It went from 2022 to 2026. So we're at the end of that 5-year strategic plan, and some of the goals were well surpassed. Like they increased like 605% or something like that in in-house surgeries and operations, which costs much less than, doing surgeries somewhere else, contracting with an outside entity. So they brought in a surgeon who's been able to really increase they're almost 100% in-house for a lot of medical treatments and procedures. So that was really impressive. And they do it just out in a trailer in the back. They have a whole surgery room set up, so it's pretty cool. The places where we talked about what, maybe there are still gaps around is goal 1, which has to do with the building capacity, because we know moving forward on building capacity or a new building requires a lot of preliminary steps. So the state awarded $1 million for design in their legislative session, but that money can't be unlocked until a site is identified. So we're listening kind of to staff's process, and of course they have a lot of steps to work through with that, but I'm looking forward to hearing what the next steps are when they're ready, because the building, I did my 4th building tour yesterday, and it just gets more heartbreaking every time to see the conditions the animals are in, and they're doing the best that they can, and they've made a lot of upgrades, but it's just kind of like dumping money into the courthouse. It doesn't get us very far. So it's kind of a similar situation where the M&O on their current building is pretty high and anything could fail at any time, kind of like what we're seeing at the courthouse. And we're all kind of anxiously anticipating the time where we can stop putting money into a building that's dilapidated and start investing in a new space. So we're kind of waiting for more on that one. But so that was goal 1. Goal 2 was the one about in-house care. And then goal 3 was around accessibility, inclusivity, and community involvement. And they've made a lot of operational improvements there. And they've had all of their staff go through some excessive DEI trainings that have resulted in all of their staff becoming certified. And I can't remember, I didn't write down, but I reported on it when it happened. They all did a DEI training and received a certification that I thought was really impressive, but I reported on it. It was like 5 months ago or so. So we did a really thorough look at the strategic plan, and they did a very good job with that. Everything that was within their control, they executed almost perfectly, or they surpassed their goals. So that was awesome. We also kind of talked about what we learned through that process, what today's reality looks like with funding constraints. All jurisdictions are facing funding constraints. So how do we forge a path forward on a new building when the biggest part of the budget is assessments to jurisdictions, and all the jurisdictions are struggling. So that's a reality that we're facing and that we're not ignoring. So we had a discussion about that. And then we kind of talked about what success will look like over the next 5 years and how we're gonna develop the next 5-year strategic plan. So it was a really nice time to kind of get together with everybody on JASCOM, and I will continue to report back once we make progress on the next steps, but I just wanted to kind of let the board know where we're at with that.
On the building idea and the funding they got, is there no way to do anything at the current site? Like it has to be a new site because for whatever reason, like they'd have to, obviously like they'd have to keep the animals going while they were building something new, or
Right.
is that one of the possible? Cause I feel like when I was on JASCOM way back, we weren't necessarily thinking of a new site. We were just trying to figure out how to get a new facility that met the needs.
Yeah, and it's not off the table
Okay.
because, like I said, we have to face the reality that we're living in. And if there's just no way to get a new building because we can't afford it, we'd be forced to look at the current building, which it would almost, like I said, I compare it to the courthouse. And in the city of Lacey, their police station was the #1 worst building. Like it had the worst rating, and now they have a new police station. And so now JASCOM is the #1 worst building. So
The whole city?
for the whole city of Lacey facilities, it's just in really bad shape. So
Lacey owns that building, that like property?
I don't know if they own the property, but it's a Lacey facility. So I think so, but I could find out for sure. And then they have the wetland in the back, so they can't expand their footprint on the current site. So even though they've got all that parking lot space, they can't actually develop it. So the footprint of the building is pretty much as big as it is, like that's about as big as they'll be able to get. And so, yeah, new construction or improvements in a building that they would have to continue operations in would be extremely difficult. But it can't be an option that's not on the table because we have to face reality and do the best we can. So,
Okay, thanks.
yeah, it's been hard to identify a site for a new building.
Commissioner Klaus, who's managing the $1 million grant? Is that Lacey that's doing that and doing the design?
I believe it's Lacey in tandem with Animal Services. Yeah, so JASCOM staff are actually considered to be Lacey, City of Lacey staff.
Okay. In the back.
Yeah.
So it would run through the city of Lacey, staff support, like their administration. That's where the executive director of JASCOM gets her support.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the assistant city manager, Shannon, she's at every meeting, so they've always got staff support there. Yeah.
As they look at alternative sites, are they only looking in Lacey?
No, they're looking countywide. So if you have any ideas, please share them at any point if you have ideas, because yeah, it's just something that's really needed. So I think they're not being super picky on location as long as it works for what they need, so.
Okay, any other committee reports from commissioners? Commissioner Mejia.
Thank you. Yeah, I attended the Public Health Leadership Academy last week with Dr. Jennifer Freiheit. We were one of the 12 jurisdictions that got chosen for this kind of initial program that they're launching. So it was very exciting to be a part of that. And it was all aimed towards like public health and bringing in commissioners as well as public health leadership. And we got to present we had to present an item that we had done in terms of public health. And we chose the pop-up ordinance, and it was really well received. I know several counties came up and, they were asking us for a copy, they were asking us for details and how it all worked out. So we were really proud of kind of the work that we did on kind of the pop-up ordinance and how that's worked out. Other than that, it was just great to kind of see what other counties are doing in terms of public health and kind of where they're prioritizing, how each one of, throughout the country, how they're funded. And we had a lot of conversation about that and kind of the models of Board of Health and kind of how different, they're different in Washington State and throughout the US, they're like completely different. So just a great opportunity overall, and very thankful to the National Association of Counties for for helping us have this opportunity. And yeah, it was fully funded by them, and it was very exciting, honestly.
Well, you reminded me of something that happened at the Building Code Council where we've been asked to enact an emergency rule related to not pop-ups, but food trucks. And there's kind of an annual inspection requirement that different jurisdictions administer differently. And like in some jurisdictions, they're saying there aren't enough of the inspectors to order to do them. And so they're asking us to kind of like suspend the rules, so to speak, and develop some new rules that are more flexible. And so we were debating about whether this was an emergency, and I just kind of popped in and said, well, the Thurston County, in the wake of COVID, we had the proliferation of pop-ups, businesses and food trucks. We did, enact some emergency interim rules, and because it's an important economic thing that's going on, I think that definitely proliferated. Anyway, so it's one of those things where we're going to chew on it for a month and decide next month, but it was something that may be affecting our local food trucks. Probably is statewide issue. Anyway, okay, thank you. Any other committee reports? Okay, very good. We're adjourned.